Thank you for listening to the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast with hosts Clara and Jimmy Hinton. If you're new to the podcast, please subscribe and share so you will never miss an episode. Android users can find us and subscribe on your Play Music app. Apple users can find us and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. You can find us on Stitcher. You can follow us on Spreaker. And you can find the podcasts on jimmyhinton.org or findingahealingplace.com. Please rate our show, subscribe, and share so that we can spread the word. Let's get into the show. Welcome to this week's episode on the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast. I have with me today my mother who's back. So, Clara, hello.
Hello. It's good to be back.
Yeah, it's been a few weeks.
Yes, it has.
And we also have a special guest with us today. We have Joe Capozzi, and Joe is an abuse survivor, and he is working on a documentary right now, and that's going to be our episode. So, Joe, I'm just going to hand it over to you and let you introduce yourself here and tell the audience who you are.
Well, thanks for having me on. My name is Joe Capozzi. I am 49 years old, and I am abuse survivor originally from New Jersey. And I currently reside in Connecticut. But for me, I would say I came forward with my abuse in 2005. And mostly it was to stop the predator who abused me from harming anyone else. I had kept that secret for over 20 years. And he was, or I should say, still is, a Catholic priest within the Archdiocese of Newark, New Jersey. But he was someone who was a pretty big part of my life, and for many years. And as we know now, why many survivors don't come forward. It's out of shame, out of fear, out of guilt. But for me, it was finally, I just couldn't keep the secret any longer. And I came forward with my abuse in 2005. And since then, I've tried to be an outspoken advocate for other survivors, but also for this issue overall in terms of what needs to be done, what I think needs to be done for both healing for survivors, but also to change the laws that currently protect the predators over the victims, over the survivors, and also protects the institutions that protect the predators as well. So, I've been pretty outspoken, and, I feel it's necessary because people didn't want this to be true. People don't, they don't want it to be true, but unfortunately, and the reality is, it is true.
Do you find that it's getting better for survivors? I mean, obviously, this last year, I think, has been just an incredible sweeping movement across the United States and really across the globe. Do you find that it's easier for you to talk this year, or to find, meet and network with other survivors who are willing to tell their stories?
Oh, absolutely. It's been, these past couple of years have been, I like to use the word amazing. And because it's a good thing that we are talking about it. When I came forward in 2005, I was the crazy one. I was the troublemaker, as I was branded. And I felt alone. But, I also took my lead from when I started to see the stories of survivors from Boston who started to speak publicly. And I started to hear the term childhood sexual abuse. I started to hear terms like grooming, which I had no idea about, which is what happened to me. And, as the years have gone on, with other cases more high profile, be it like Bill Cosby, be it Harvey Weinstein, be it in gymnastics, in Hollywood, it makes it a higher profile subject, and which brings out more people who are speaking publicly about it, and higher profile names, which does help, because there's strength in numbers, and what we've been seeing, especially in this past year, with I've been following what's been going on in Pennsylvania, and for me to watch the survivors in Pennsylvania who have come forward in such big numbers, but who have come forward together
Yeah.
Which has been, for me, that's the great thing, especially this year, witnessing the strength in them coming forward. I mean, they inspired me incredibly. So I'm fortunate that, I now have this great network of survivors to reach out to and to talk with. It's incredibly helpful.
Yeah. Sean Doherty had said something when, he was saying this before I had interviewed him for this podcast, but Sean, I don't know if you know this, Sean grew up just 20 miles north of where we live right now.
Right.
So in fact, his wife is still there. And of course he bounces back and forth between Johnstown and New York City because of his restaurant that he owns in New York City. But, Sean talked about the power of social media. And he said, even 5 years ago, we didn't have this power of networking. And he said with the advancement of social media, you can instantly get the attention of the media, which is another really incredible platform. And the media has been fantastic. I feel like this past year, they have done a phenomenal job of reporting on sexual abuse in the church and the cover-ups. There's just a documentary that Sarah Smith, she's an investigative journalist in Texas, and she worked for the Star Telegram. And she did an 8-month investigation into the Independent Fundamentalist Baptist Church and uncovered, I think, 160 pastors who are still in ministry. And they're just being shuffled from church to church, and hundreds of cases of abuse, hundreds of victims spanning across 40 states and Canada. And this started with her just talking to people there locally with one church, and it just mushroomed into this huge investigation. And the cover-ups it's just surreal. But, I agree with Sean, and I think there's so much power in media and social media and networking with survivors. We've been doing advocacy for seven years now.
Yeah.
And I've not seen anything like I've seen in this last year. I mean, it's absolutely astounding the number of advocates who are coming forward. And, most of them are survivors, and they're like, okay, I'm just going to take the charge, and they're doing what you're doing. And they're saying, we're going to teach people. We can't be silent anymore. And I'm super encouraged by it. And I think it's a really powerful moment where survivors are getting their power back and stripping it from the church leaders who have created this monopoly where it's almost a sense of people have to bow down to them, and it doesn't matter what they do, they're invincible because they hold all the power. Well, I think they're learning that they don't have as much power as they thought they had. And I think
they are human.
Yeah.
We are all human.
Absolutely.
And
I think they're learning that the hard way.
That's fine. Yeah. That's how it had to happen, for the fact that they were actively covering this up. And, this is across all forms of, be it the church, be it sports, be it schools, be it, any place where you have someone that has a sense of power over someone else, and a sense of, for me, it was, you automatically gave trust to a priest. That's how I grew up. I grew up with that. And, now it was the same thing for coaches. It was the same thing for teachers and Boy Scout leaders, agents in Hollywood, stars in Hollywood. So this abuse of power that now everybody is starting to understand. So, I relate to the women who were abused by Cosby. I relate to, men and women who were abused by teachers. It's the same kind of MO. It's the same motive. It's the same playbook, but it's all coming out now. And yes, social media is a huge part of it, because you can have your own voice. You can write your statements out, or you can post your video in your own voice, and it will get out there and it will be seen. And, for many years when we didn't have this, what did people have? They could maybe write a letter, or they could hope to be interviewed by a newspaper, which most of the time they weren't even really covering it. They weren't either survivors weren't comfortable talking publicly, or the papers just were not covering out of fear of, maybe they're not going to get that ad space that they need. Who knows? Yeah. But what we do know now is that it has changed. And I mean, I think for me, especially in this past year, this documentary that I've been working on called The Peloton of One is about a man who was abused by a priest in New Jersey. And he currently lives in Chicago. His name's Dave Ohlmuller. And for him, his story was, the same as my story. And I related so much to what happened to him. But he wanted to do something about it. When he came forward with his abuse a couple of years, he wanted to take some action. He wanted to create something that, for him, for the pain that he suffered all those years, he needed to do something to kind of help people to heal. And so he put out there, I want to ride a bike from Chicago to New Jersey, to Montclair, New Jersey, to where my hometown, to where I was abused. And along the way, I want to shine a light on the issue with statute of limitations and the reform that's needed. So we connected through social media. That's how I met him. I saw him posting his stories, and I was like, wow, this guy went through the same exact thing that I went through in New Jersey. So we connected through social media, and he told me about this idea of wanting to ride a bike. And I'm a filmmaker, and for me, my advocacy has been through art. I wrote a play called For Pete's Sake about my experience of being abused, but I did it to really help myself heal, but also to help others understand the impact of childhood sexual abuse. Yeah. Then I met my wife through writing that play, and then we did a movie together called Confession, a short 15-minute movie that I wanted people to understand the mindset of a sexual abuse survivor. And we did that together, and she directed it. And that was another work of advocacy through art that I wanted to do. And I put these things out hoping, I call them healing tools, because hopefully someone will watch this and for a moment not feel alone, and for a moment, maybe they understand a little bit more for themselves. And so, excuse me. And so when I saw Dave, and Dave and I started talking, and he knew I've done filmmaking and I've written, he talked about wanting to do it as a documentary. And I was like, well, it's a great idea, but we need something more. It can't just be you riding a bike. We need to learn something along the way. And so I obviously saw what was going on in Pennsylvania, and I saw what was going on in the states that we would have to cross. We started Chicago, so Illinois, and then we go to Indianapolis. We went to Indiana. And then we went to Ohio, and then Pennsylvania, and down to southern New Jersey, and all the way up the coast with a stop in New York, but then we ended up in Montclair. But along the way, we met with survivors and advocates, people whose stories will give a different perspective each way about this crisis that we have. And so for me, Pennsylvania was like, everything was going on there, and I wanted to meet these people, and I wanted these people to be in this documentary. And we were really lucky to through social media, through reaching out, I was able to connect with all of these survivors and advocates. And they trusted me enough to agree to be in something like this, not meeting me in person, not meeting Dave in person, but just kind of trusting that what we were doing was what I feel is going to be an incredibly beautiful, inspiring, impactful movie. So we stopped along the way, but in Pennsylvania, we met with Tommy Williams, and, this incredible 15-year-old survivor advocate, and his mom, Kelly. And we had a great stop with him, because he really, to watch this 15-year-old talking to Dave, who's 48, but Tommy's an incredibly, blessed child, in the sense that he has taken this horrific thing that happened to him, but he has made it into, such a beautiful, inspiring piece of advocacy, what he's doing, him and his mom are doing. Especially, I just heard about him the other day. Oddly enough, I had heard his name a couple times and never really put it together. And then somebody said, "Have you heard about Tommy in Pennsylvania? I think he's close to you." And
I looked, and Tommy's in Altoona, which is just an hour up the road from us. And this kid is incredible. And you're absolutely right. Like, it is amazing what he's doing. And I mean, at the age of 15, it's just unreal. Really cool.
Well, we met, so we went to Altoona, and we interviewed Tommy and his mom, and we ended up having a nice dinner with them and really getting to know them. But for me, it was seeing Tommy's impact on Dave. Dave, through this ride, he's still very, very emotionally raw in many ways. He came forward a couple of years ago, and as I remember when I came forward, those first couple of years are just like, they're exhilarating, but they're also really emotionally just tough. And, you're so raw, and you've exposed this secret that you've been holding on to all these years. But to watch Tommy talk to Dave was great. It was beautiful. And like, this kid, this young man, I should say, inspired me so much, and his mom, and I'm lucky I got to meet them. And, and then at the time, they were having the rally in Harrisburg, and it was the rally to get the lawmakers back to work to vote on, this window.
Yeah, Mom and I were actually we were at the first rally that they did, and then I went back. I went back another time, but I don't think that you and I were there at the same time.
It was, I forget the exact date, but Dave and I, and we made it a point. We actually went back. We were in New Jersey, and we had to head back because we wanted to be there, and we wanted Dave to meet a lot of the other survivors. And we ended up interviewing Mary McHale, another incredible advocate, and such a smart, fearless person. And so we got to interview her, and for Dave to stand on the steps, the State House steps with all the other survivors, it was a very important moment for him, because coming forward for him was not easy, and it's not easy for anyone, but for him especially. And now kind of coming forward publicly, being the subject of this documentary, but standing on the steps with all the cameras there and putting yourself out there, it's not easy. It's not easy at all. And there is something empowering, but at the same time, when it's over and you walk away from a moment like that, it is it's just a tough emotional toll that it takes on. I know if I could speak for myself. While I can talk about this stuff and share my experiences with people, it does at the same time, bring you back to those moments. And that's not always a, easy and healthy thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, man, I think that's really cool. And I have to give a true confession here. I'm not into sports. So Mom and I had to look up what a Peloton is. Because your documentary is a Peloton of One. And I was like, should we know what a Peloton is? And so I won't be able to explain that. But when we learned what a Peloton is, the title of this documentary blew me away. And I think it's the coolest thing. And you have to explain that to the audience, because there are probably like one or two other idiots like me who don't know what a Peloton is.
I didn't know what a Peloton was. Okay.
I don't feel so dumb then.
My co-producer on this is a man by the name of John Bernardo, and he went to high school with Dave. And John is also a fellow filmmaker, and him, along with our director Steve Mallorca, they've worked on a lot of stuff together, and I teamed up with them, so we are co-producing this together. But John is, John's great. John is incredibly creative, and he came up with the idea of a Peloton of One. And initially when he said it, I just went, oh, that sounds good. And I had to go look what a Peloton. So, a Peloton in the cycling world is a team of riders. So there could be 7 or 8 riders. And within that Peloton, each one has a role. And so, that one person's role may be the one who's actually going to win that day, while the other ones are drafting or doing all of these other bicycling terms that I somewhat know now. But it's a team of people. So obviously with the Peloton of One, Dave is biking by himself. And along the way, he gets to bike with some people. We met some people that we didn't necessarily know along the way. But he for the most part, he's this team of one. Now, as we got through it, we started to recognize that the crew that we had, there's 6 of us, and then there's Dave. So there's 7 of us. And we became this Peloton together and called ourselves a Magnificent 7,
Very cool.
That was John again. But yeah. I think that this crew of guys that we had going along with Dave, we didn't know anything about bikes. We didn't know how to change tires. Dave didn't know how to change a tire. Okay. And we made it through the whole ride up until the last day, the second to last day. And I said to John, I go, he hasn't had like any real bike issues. And I go, he hasn't had that flat tire, which we knew he didn't know how to change. And the second to last day, towards the end of the day, he got his first flat.
Awesome.
Okay. Well, awesome to us as a film crew. We're like, this will be interesting to film. Not so awesome for Dave. But the lucky thing was that day we were joined on the ride by a semi-professional cyclist and from New Jersey who was really showing Dave how to ride in a group. And we capture all of this, how to ride in a pseudo Peloton, a small Peloton, because that day Dave's brother rode with us as well. But Craig is his name. He took the lead on changing the tire. And when John and I pulled up in our van, we were like, no. Dave needs to do this.
Yeah.
So that will make for some interesting footage. But, it was one of those things where the crew and Dave, we got to bond, obviously, for 2 weeks on the road the way we did it. And, in the end, we are a Peloton. We are a family that have, and along the way interviewing all of these great people, from Marcy Hamilton to Danielle Palomeni, a survivor from Ohio, to Senator Joe Vitale from New Jersey, who's an incredible advocate and supporter of survivors in New Jersey. He's in the state Senate in New Jersey, and he's been a leading active politician who has stood up from the beginning for survivors when a lot of politicians are still clinging on to whoever they're protecting or whatever they're protecting. They will not vote to pass bills that will protect children. That's coming to a close. It's gonna come to a close because we keep doing what we're doing, having the conversation that you and I are having right now. This is important. This is why we need to keep speaking out because it's not over. It's far from over. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with you. And we had gone to that rally and, they had Rachel Denhollander come in and she spoke there too. And, Rachel and we had spoken online some, and just were kind of, really, it was really cool. It was another one of those social media networking. And I had introduced myself and she said, "Oh, I know who you are." She's like, it was your story that helped empower some of us to come forward. Well, absolutely. I had no clue about that. So that was really cool. But there at Harrisburg, they're right in front of the steps that you filmed at. She asked me a question. She said, Have you been coming to Harrisburg and rallying on behalf of the survivors as an advocate? And to be honest with you, I haven't. And, that was kind of a turning point for me because I could hear the desperation in her voice that, us survivors don't need to be alone doing this. Like we need other people to help. We need other people to step in. And so, that was our first trip to Harrisburg.
Right.
I've been back since. I've been meeting with senators and, talking to them on the phone and, it's really easy to do. And I think that's what people, what people don't realize is we need people to pick up the phones and talk to senators that, just like church leaders, senators are human too. And, if you can have a friendly conversation on the phone with them, like they actually appreciate it. And, I'm finding that, with the hard work that the survivors are doing here in Pennsylvania, they've changed the minds of quite a few senators. And, I think it takes a whole army of people linking arms. And that's why I love I just love the idea of the Peloton of One and what you were describing with you guys all kind of working together. And I love metaphors, and I speak in metaphors a lot. I think that's going to be a powerful documentary, man. I think it's going to be really cool.
Well, we are, now we're in the phase of. Well, first, Jimmy, I want to say, see what you're doing with your show, with this podcast. What you're doing is we need people to be doing all of these different types of things. Okay?
Yeah.
Be it from those who stand out in front of a church holding a picture of themselves as a child when they were abused, to those that speak, openly in the press, to those that will call up the senators and speak with them, to, artistically, to movies, to theater, to music, through painting, any way that we have to fill the minds of people with an understanding that this is a sad, sad thing. And it's a horrible cover-up that's continuing to go on. But the strength in us and the strength and the healing that comes along with it is it's important to talk about it. And people have gotten more comfortable, especially in the past couple of years, to actually have the conversation where it's like, oh, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to hear it. No, it's if we talk about it the way we're talking about it, where we're just kind of having a discussion where we're allowing each other to talk and to listen, which is the most important thing, is listening. Yeah. So, I hope with a Peloton of One, I mean, right now we are, kind of on hold in the sense that we need to raise about $25,000 to finish the film. We have it shot. We have a couple interviews that people who have reached out to us, some higher profile names that we want to be able to film. But, we have gone along with this, raising money along the way. And, we have a GoFundMe link through Dave Ohlmuller. That's where we've been raising the majority of our money. But,
could you give me that link so that we can link to it in the podcast here? We'll put it right in the description so that our listeners, if there's anybody out there who wants to give to this, I think it's, it's just so powerful. And what you're doing is just beyond belief and so needed, so needed.
Yeah, and I think it's, in the end, like I said, it's going to be a film about healing, about an inspiration, and also about understanding, and hopefully being another tool to add to bring change in terms of what we need to do to really start protecting the children of our country and to stop protecting the predator and the institutions that hide them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, well, maybe if you email me that link, I'll put that into the description, and then I can plug it on my Twitter and Facebook, and we'll get you as much exposure as we can, because
that's
I just
great.
think it's so needed. This needs to be out there.
Yep, and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. We've been, like, again, social media, getting the story out there. Getting content out there that gives you a sense of what we're doing. And on the GoFundMe page, you'll see a couple short videos there of some of the stuff that, we have filmed already. And we did a great 3-minute behind the scenes video of what the 2 weeks were like filming, which was actually an incredible experience. Incredible. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Really cool. Well, Joe, man, I just want to thank you for being our guest today, and for everything that you're doing. Your voice absolutely needs to be heard. This documentary needs to be out there. It needs to be published. And is that the right terminology? I'm not a filmmaker.
It needs to be finished, and we're gonna release it, and hopefully it'll be picked up by some of these great, be it Netflix, be it Amazon, be it in the theaters, be it HBO, be it however.
Yeah.
We hope to have this finished by April or May of 2019. If a lot depends on the funding, of course.
Yes. Well, listeners, again, if anybody's moved and so inclined to help Joe and his crew out, we'll post links to it, and definitely follow. This is a cool documentary, and I'm just so encouraged that you guys are doing this. Very cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me, and And to your beautiful mom, thank you.
Oh, thank you so much.
fellow Jersey.
That's
Jersey
right.
Night. So I appreciate your time today and for letting me talk.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joe, and thank our listeners, and we'll catch you next round. Thanks again for listening to today's episode of the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast. If you found it helpful, please follow on Spreaker, subscribe on Google Play Music, Apple Podcasts, or Stitcher. Share with your friends and tell the world. Join us in speaking out on sex abuse so we can change the tides and prevent abuse.